A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Jafar Jafri, and I would like to welcome you all to the series of Living the Deen of the Masumeen. As most of you already know, for the next 5 nights, including this one, by the grace of Allah, our scholar Shaykh Muzaffar Hyder will be giving us a lecture at this time wherever you may be around the world. Tonight's topic is Mahram versus Non-Mahram, the trials of segregation. And now that I think about it, that definitely would have sounded cooler with a drum roll. Moving on, I would now like to invite Brother Efad to begin tonight's event with recitation of the Holy Quran. So if Brother Efad is ready, he may begin, inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. عما يتساءلون عن النبأ العظيم الذي هم فيه مختلفون كلا سيعلمون ثم كلا سيعلمون ألم نجعل الأرض مهادا والجبال أوتادا وخلقناكم أزواجا وجعلنا نومكم سباتا وجعلنا الليل لباسا وجعلنا النهار معاشا وبنينا فوقكم سبعا شدادا وجعلنا سراجا وحاجا وأنزلنا من المعصرات ماء ثجاجا لنخرج به حبا ونباتا وجنات ألفافا إن يوم الفصل كان ميقاتا يوم ينفخ في الصور فتأتون أفواجا وفتحت السماء فكانت أبوابا وسيرت الجبال فكانت سرابا إن جهنم كانت مرصادا للطاغين مآبا لابثين فيها حقابا لا يذوقون فيها بردا ولا شرابا إلا حميما وغساقا جزاء وفاقا إنهم كانوا لا يرجون حسابا وكذبوا بآياتنا كذابا وكل شيء حصيناه كتابا فذوقوا فلن نزيدكم إلا عذابا إن للمتقين مفازا حدائق وأعنابا وكواعب ترابا وكأسا دحاقا لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا كذابا جزاء من ربك عطاء حسابا رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما الرحمن لا يملكون منه خطابا يوم يقوم الروح والملائكة صفا لا يتكلمون إلا من أذن له الرحمن وقال صوابا ذلك اليوم الحق فمن شاء اتخذ إلى ربه مآبا إنا أنذرناكم عذابا قريبا يوم ينظر المرء ما قدمت يدوه ويقول الكافر يا ليتني كنت ترابا صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Jazakallah, Brother Rafat, for the beautiful recitation of the Quran. Now, before I ask the Shaykh to begin the lecture, I would like to say something to the youth that are listening, my brothers and sisters. And I didn't really prepare for this because I wanted it to come straight from the heart. So I hope I do well, and I apologize if I say anything that offends anyone. But I say this to whoever needs to hear this because it's something I wish someone said to me. And I say this as a friend because I need more friends. No, I'm joking. But what I want to say is that I really strongly urge all my brothers and sisters to make notes and listen very attentively, not just to this lecture, but any lecture in the future, inshallah. And I'll tell you why in a bit. And with no disrespect to anyone, but I'd like you all to think about this by yourself. You don't have to discuss it with anyone, but just internally. Um, if I told you that all the like everything you're gonna be informed about today in this event and future events, if I told you it's gonna be on your next big exam, how many of you would start making notes and listen more attentively than you already will? And this is for me too. It's something I need to kind of improve myself on too. And sometimes we forget that we are living inside the biggest exam there is, and that is the test of life. And the examiner is Allah. There is a day where we will get a degree, and whether we fail or pass, we will find out on that day. And the only difference between that exam and these exams is that we don't have a clock. You don't know when time is going to be up. You don't know when the examiner is going to tell you that now lift up your pen, lift up your pencil. Time is up, your exam is done, now come. And my point is that it's scholars like Muzaffar Hyder that made me realize that the way in which I look at the world is very wrong. And he didn't ask me to say this, by the way, for anyone thinking that. But it made me realize that I am being lied to by these apps that I'm using, by these social networking apps, by these news channels I watch. I'm being lied to. And the only truth there is the truth of Islam. And it's very important for us to take knowledge like this very seriously. And most of you probably know than I ever will in my life. But there is something really important we have to realize, and that is that out there is a fight going on. And right now, it's not with swords or guns, but there is a right and there is a wrong. There is a good and there is a bad. There is one team out there working for Allah and working for Imam Zamana. And there is also a team out there working for Shaitan and the Dajjal. I've already taken up too much time, so I'm going to stop. But I'll leave you with one last thing, that if you are able to be someone who can take even one thing from a lecture, from these lectures or in the future, inshallah, but if you are able to take one thing today and you are able to improve your tomorrow, then you have walked out a winner. And I say that with so much confidence. And I apologize to everyone for taking up so much time already. And without further ado, I'd like to invite Shaykh Muzaffar Hyder to begin the lecture, inshallah. Shaykh, if you're there.
Assalamu alaikum, I'm here. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنحر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث صدق الله العلي العظيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين سيما بقية الله في الأرضين ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Dear brothers and sisters, respected elders, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to start by giving my deepest condolences to all the believers out there on these days of mourning and grief. I'd also like to thank Mr. and Mrs. Ali for this opportunity and for considering us worthy of presenting this majlis. I'd also like to say a word for Brother Ja'far, the dear host, and for Brother Ahfad. Brother Ja'far, that was a really good hosting, and I want to see more of it, inshallah. And Brother Ahfad, it was a very beautiful recitation. I wasn't quite expecting that, so mashallah to both of you. One thing that I've noticed in both of you, and a lot of the youths out there in general, a lot of the revolutionary youths, is sincerity. And you reminded me of a line from Adab al-Salat. Imam Khomeini, he says something along the lines of, you should allow your heart to be the tongue's qibla and not move your tongue except with the heart's permission. Now, this is a line from Adab al-Salat which really stood out to me, and it is a beautiful example of how we should be. And I saw that sincerity. Inshallah, I hope and I pray that my eyes did not deceive me. Today, we're discussing a very special subject, and that subject is about mahram and non-mahram. But before we start, I'd like to ask everybody out there to recite the Surah Fatiha for Sayyid Baqir Musavi ibn Sayyid Razi Musavi and Abida Abid bint Ja'far Ali Khan. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And everyone, wherever you are, I'd like you to give a loud and boisterous salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Mahram versus non-mahram. First of all, let's define what this means. A mahram in the Islamic theology or the Islamic ideology is a person who is close to you. It's like a family member in front of whom you can do certain things that you can't do in front of a non-mahram. A non-mahram would be somebody who's outside of the house, a stranger, so to speak. So to quickly highlight what this means is a woman, for example, has to observe hijab in front of a non-mahram because they're strangers. And as for the mahrams, those who are in her family, she doesn't need to observe hijab. Now, when it comes to this discussion, there's something that we need to open up first of all. So there's a difference between something being haram and something being the Islamic culture. Okay, so there are certain things which may not be haram, but they're still against the Islamic culture. The way I'd like you to think about this is a parameter. So imagine that there is a base, a military base or a fortress or a castle that you need to defend. That central point is so important that you don't just put your guards around it. No, you set up a perimeter. That perimeter could be kilometers away. but you will set your guards and all your towers and all your defenses far, far away from the base. You don't want to catch any enemies when they get to the base itself. No, no, no. You want to get those enemies before they even pass the perimeter. Okay. So if you think about the perimeter and the base itself, in this example, the perimeter which has been set out is what the marjas do for us. You see, the marjas, generally speaking, they highlight for us what is haram and what is halal. But that doesn't mean that they will tell us about the Islamic culture. It doesn't mean that they will tell us exactly what is precisely ideal according to the Islamic culture. And this will make more sense as we go on, inshallah. The first point that I want to discuss when it comes to the mahram, non-mahram debate, so to speak, is the idea that, brothers and sisters, respected elders, you are weak. That's right. You're weak. You're pathetic. We all are. The Quran tells us, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ أَن يُخَفِّفَ عَنْكُمْ. Allah wishes to make your burdens lighter for you. He wants to make it easier for you. وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. And mankind has been created weak. Okay, so Allah, He loves you. He has mercy upon you. He's very kind and compassionate. That's why He's telling us certain things about the perimeter. That's why He tells us what's haram and halal. Because He knows He's created us with certain weaknesses and He wants us to be prepared to face those weaknesses. You are weak. And when it comes to the mahram, non-mahram discussion, certain things have been told to us by the Ahlul Bayt, by the Quran, by the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, in order to safeguard us from potential danger. But sometimes we fall into the trap of thinking, I'm strong, I'm tough, I'm spiritually woke, I can handle this kind of a situation. That's not what Islam is telling us. Islam is telling us, don't think of yourself as strong. I'll give you an example of somebody who was very strong. Prophet Yusuf. Look at how strong he was. He was a prophet, one of the great awliya Allah, one of the great messengers and prophets of Allah. And yet the Quran tells us when he was alone with Zulaykha and she locks the doors, what did Yusuf do? He didn't just stay there saying, I'm tough, I can handle this, I'm a prophet, I won't succumb to anything. No. Yusuf runs to the door, he tries to escape. Herein lies a philosophy for us, that we are not to think of ourselves as strong. No, we are to recognize that Allah has created us weak and to try to distance ourselves from any potential danger. I want to give you another story now. It is about a person who had reached spiritual heights that most people can only ever imagine. He was what we refer to as mustajab dua, meaning that he had reached such a spiritual height that if he prayed for something, it would be given to him immediately. If he prays for anything, Allah will give it to him in that moment. Only prophets and imams, according to the ahadith, and the great awliya Allah have acquired such a gift of Allah. This man had acquired this gift. What happened with this man? One day, he was sitting and he was meditating, or he was talking, or he was preaching the religion. A family came to him and they said, our daughter has an ailment. She's sick. She's got some sort of problem. Can you pray to Allah that she'll be healed? He says, sure. Leave her with me. You leave and I'll pray for her. They leave. She's now alone with him. He prays to Allah and she becomes healed. In that moment, his intention changes. In that very moment, the shaitan deceives him. And at that moment, he commits one of the great sins. It doesn't end there. Because he has now committed this sin with this woman, he is afraid that she will tell others. So he kills her in order to safeguard his reputation. He then buries her, and the family come and find her and dig her up, and he is disgraced utterly. This is a man who had reached that level where his du'as would be accomplished straight away. And now he's fallen to this stage. It gets worse. He's paraded in the streets and his reputation is completely kaput, destroyed. At that moment, they tie a rope around his neck to execute him. At that moment, the shaitan appears in front of him, and the shaitan whispers to him and says, do you want me to save you from all of this situation? Do you want me to protect you from all of this? I can save you. The man says, okay, what do I have to do for you to save me? He says, all I want you to do is do one sujood to me. The man says, they've got a neck around my head, and they've got a rope around my neck. How am I supposed to escape from here? How am I supposed to even do sujood? The shaitan says, don't worry about that. Just close your eyes with the intention of worshiping me, and I'll save you from this. The man closes his eyes. At the very moment that his eyes close, they execute him. He dies in the state of worshiping shaitan. Deep story, I know. So the point in this, and this is a hadith which is narrated in Ayatollah Dastaghaib's Greater Sins, I believe, which is a brilliant book. Everybody should go and visit that book and have a look at it. It's got some beautiful analogies which can help us get closer to Allah. What happened to this person? He was at such a state, at such a spiritual height, he had reached enlightenment, so to speak. And then he ended his life by worshipping shaitan. Where did he really go wrong? Where did he actually go wrong? This mustajab dua. It was at that initial stage where he was alone with a non-mahram, this seemingly small thing, and look at what it can turn into. We have examples of this in the modern era. This is not just something that happened a long time ago. No. This happens. Brothers, here is the main point that I'd like to share with you today. You have a beast inside you. Yes, you do. You have a terrible beast. You have a volcanic eruption inside you. You have a monster inside you. Sisters, dear sisters, if a man ever tries to convince you that he doesn't have that beast inside him, run away. And this is the reality, okay? And I don't want to elaborate too much because it would become inappropriate, but just look at the world around us, okay? Look at the types of websites that exist. There are reasons why children are, it's not safe for them to go out at night. There are reasons why certain laws are in place in every country in the world. We need to, and I say this especially to my dear youths, we need to wake up now and recognize that this beast exists and how to tackle it. It's not about having suspicion on people. No, remember, Allah, yuridullahu an yukhaffifa ankum. Allah wishes to lighten your burden. It exists and we need to be prepared for it. Now, sometimes it's not about the beast, okay? Sometimes, the beast does exist. Sometimes it's not about that. Sometimes it's about the emotional attachments that are developed through spending times with from the opposite gender. Sometimes it's about the pain, the heartbreak that it can cause. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of his mercy, wants to protect you from all those things. Now, there are certain excuses that people will make when it comes to engaging with the opposite gender. Now, before we come to these excuses, dear brothers and sisters, respected elders, as we said, there are certain things which are haram. The marjas have told us, for example, shaking hands with the opposite gender, haram. For example, not wearing hijab in front of non-mahrams, haram, etc. But there are certain things which may not be haram, but they're frowned upon in Islamic culture. There's certain things which are not part of the Islamic culture. And I want to give you an example. For example, mixed gatherings, right? Where you're having men, women, and they're mingling, they're talking, they're laughing, they're joking with each other. And this is against the Islamic ethics. It's against the Islamic cultural code of conduct. And I'm not talking about the Indian or Pakistani or Iraqi or Iranian culture. No, I'm talking about Islamic culture itself. Because remember, Islam has its own culture as well. Okay, so the mixing between the genders in Islam, generally speaking, is not it's not a good thing to do. But we have to ask ourselves, are we saying certain things are impractical because we actually believe they're impractical, or are we saying that we don't want to do them because our heart doesn't want to do it? Because let's face it, gatherings where there are two opposite genders and they're talking can sometimes be fruitful. They can sometimes be exciting. They can sometimes be more fun. Sometimes when you're sitting with just the guys, it can get a little bit boring. Sometimes when you're sitting with just the girls, it can just get a little bit tedious. And when you mix it up a little bit, then it becomes more fun. But is that the Islamic culture? I want to put forth that no, it's not. Islam is actually for segregation. Islam is actually for dividing the community between men and women and keeping men together and women together. Now, I want to present to you, and we're going to come back to this, don't worry, I'm not going to just open that can of worms and leave it. No, we're going to come back to it, and we'll discuss how Islam does actually communicate this to us through the Quran and the Hadith. Now, there are certain excuses that we make, and I'd like to discuss these 4 excuses before we come to that. The first excuse that people make is, we're just friends. We're just friends. Isn't that the funniest thing you've ever heard? Just friends? Just friends. What does that mean? Okay, so I want to be very, very serious about this. In Islam, there's no such thing as having a friend of the opposite gender. That's called something. You know, if you have a friend who's a girl, it's called a girlfriend. Right? If you have a friend who's a boy, it's called a boyfriend, and it's called that for a reason. You know, you go back just not even 100 years, you go back 50 years, this would not have been seen as appropriate. But through the mainstream media and through some of our Indo-Pak culture as well, and Iraqi and other cultures as well, this has become a little bit of a norm. Now, I want to highlight a reality, guys. This is the reality. It never happens that between a boy and a girl who are just friends, it never happens that feelings do not develop. It never happens that they just remain just friends, unless there's something medically wrong with one of them. Either the boy will fall for the girl or vice versa. This always happens. And please correct me if I'm wrong. And if you're a youth trying to say that, no, you are wrong, wait for it. It's coming. Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, Salamullah alayha, taught us something very valuable when it comes to discussing this. She said, it is better that men never see women and women never see men. Okay, this hadith exists, and I'm sure lots of people have stumbled across it before and thought, what? Really? That sounds a little bit bizarre. That sounds a little bit extreme. Well, she's not saying it in a total sense. She's not saying it in an absolute sense, which we're going to discuss as well. But the general premise is there. It's better for the genders not to see each other. Sometimes, dear brothers and sisters, as we said, it's not about the beast. Sometimes it's about when you mingle with the opposite gender too much, it affects your mind. It affects your heart in a way that is so subtle that you won't even realize what's happening. It will start to change your behavior. Day by day, it will start to change the way you think. I want to give you a practical example so you can see it and you can know exactly what I'm talking about. Every school in the world, let me rephrase that. Every school in the West, as far as I know, has a group of popular girls. If it's a girls' school, you know, if it's a mixed school, it has a popular girls group. You know, the popular girls, you know, those guys in the popular girls. Have you noticed that the popular girls usually have a guy friend who just hangs around with them? What's that all about? Why does that happen? That's kind of weird, isn't it? You keep hanging around with girls, you're going to end up becoming the popular girl's best guy friend. And you know what they say about him? It's the whole LGBT agenda right here, okay? And that's what happens. The guy who spends too much time with the girls, he starts to adopt certain things. they're always, for example, if they're talking about nail polish or, I don't know, girl things, you'll notice that this guy who's constantly hanging around with them, he starts to talk in their way, starts to think like them, and the opposite happens as well. It's a little bit of a different, vice versa as well, okay? So here's one thing that it does, which is not necessarily to do with that beast, but it still has negative consequences on our behavior. So that's the first excuse. We're just friends. The second excuse that we make is, they're my cousin. My cousin. That's what we say, right? It's a very, very common excuse which is used throughout the different Muslim communities. Well, we're not non-Mahram. She's like a sister to me, but she's not your sister. Yeah, but he's like my brother. He's not your brother. Okay? And Islam is very clear on this subject. And for some reason, we still get confused about it. We shouldn't. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the Quran, in Surah Nur, if you go to verse 30 and 31, look at what it says. قُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ say to the believing men, يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ, to lower a part of their vision. And you go to the next vision, to the next verse, and it tells you the same thing for women, but then it tells you a list of things for the women, which we're going to talk about towards the end of the lecture, inshallah. A list of things which are very important. But then after that, it tells you all the people who are mahram to the actually all the people who are mahram to the woman, right? So it'll tell you your husbands, your father's husband, your father's husbands, your husbands, your fathers, your brothers, your aunties, your paternal uncles, etc., etc., etc. Okay, and it highlights all those people who are mahram to you. Look, these kinds of things are not usually stipulated in the Quran. If you notice it, those who are familiar with the Quran, it's usually not talking about ahkam. But here, Allah highlights it even in the Quran. So something tells me that maybe Allah knew that people would always try to blur the lines. People would always try to find excuses. Allah puts it right there in the Quran. Go to Surah Nur, go to verse 31, go and read it, and you'll see for yourself, your cousins are not your mahram. And what this means, dear brothers and sisters, respected elders, is all the same rules apply. Every same rule applies. Your cousin is like any other non-mahram out there. Okay, you need to observe hijab in front of them. If they are your female cousins, you need to not be shaking hands with them. You can't be, and this is the perimeter that we're talking about. This is haram and halal. But beyond that now, remember, we're not just talking about what's haram and halal. We're talking about the Islamic culture. We shouldn't be laughing excessively with non-mahrams. We shouldn't be sitting next to non-mahrams. We shouldn't be necessarily talking about idle chit-chat with non-mahrams. Okay, we should try to distance ourselves from that. Now, when it comes to cousins, I do understand that it can be a little bit difficult, and a lot of people will see this and they'll be like, that's a little bit too hard. But I love spending time with, my non-mahram family members. And you're right. And there are barakat to spending time with your family members. And that's good as well. But try as much as you can to understand that Islam is telling us, for example, to keep that relationship there. Say salaam alaikum. But generally speaking, boys should mingle with boys. Girls should mingle with girls. Okay, and again, you might not like this. Remember, Islam sometimes is not about that which we like or that which is easy for us. Sometimes we have to do those things which are difficult for us. One of the things that I'd like to highlight at this point that's happening in our communities or has been happening is that kids, when they're growing up, they're not really mahram to each other because they're not even baligh, right? So a boy and a girl, their cousins, they'll play together. As they grow up, they continue to play together. And then the barrier just never gets created. And because of this, they grow up and now they're adults. They're actual fully fledged adults, but they're still playing together or talking together like they're children. But we need to avoid this because it does have negative consequences. So that's the second excuse that people make. She's my cousin, he's my cousin. Third excuse that people make, age. Age is one of those big excuses that people make. She's not old enough. Well, she's baligh now. She shouldn't be sitting on your lap, for instance. Or sometimes it's not about a non-mahram being younger. Sometimes it's about a non-mahram being older. And you'll hear people using the excuse, she's old enough to be my mother. She's still your mahram. Okay, we have to be very careful here, dear brothers and sisters, respected elders. If somebody is mahram to you, do not fall for the trap of thinking, oh, it's okay because she's older or she's younger. No, it doesn't work that way. If she's mahram, she's mahram. And just a quick point, one of the problems that we face here is when it comes to adopting hijab for young women, we start to train them too late. We should try to train them from a younger age. And I'm telling my youths this so that for the next generation, we can implement this from a young age, that we teach them to observe a level of chastity, even when they're not mahram yet, because it's going to be difficult for them when they get older otherwise. Okay, I want to give you a story here because I know a lot of this information might be a little bit overwhelming. There was a Hausa student. This is a beautiful story, and it really highlights to what extent it is advisable for you to go to in order to avoid the opposite gender. He was a very, very handsome Hausa student. And what happened is this woman, she fell for him, and then she went inside his house. And just like the Prophet Yusuf and Zulaykha situation, she closed the door, she locked it, and she told him, if you don't spend some time with me now, I'm going to tell everybody that you're an indecent person and you did an indecent act with me. He thinks, whoa, what do I do in this situation? I'm completely trapped. What do I do? So what he does is he goes, okay, fine, you win. Just let me go to the bathroom to freshen up. So he goes to the bathroom, and this is Iran that we're talking about, I believe. And they have the whole toilets on the ground. It's not a nice scene. But then he looked down and he reached down and long story short, guys, he covered himself with poo. Okay, and nastiness. And then he went out and he said, I'm ready. And she was so disgusted, she told him to get out. Okay. So this is how this Hausa student avoided being in that situation. May Allah bless him. One of the beautiful, so basically what it means is, dear brothers and sisters, avoid the non-mahrams, otherwise you'll get yourself into some deep. Shall we move on? So the third excuse is younger and older. Doesn't work that way, I'm afraid. Fourth excuse. What's the fourth excuse? Well, the fourth excuse, and very important now, I'd like us to take this a little bit more seriously. The fourth point is about positions of trust. Positions of trust. Dear brothers and sisters, respected elders, one of the excuses that we make to break that barrier which is supposed to be between the mahrams and the non-mahrams is a position of trust. So what we say is, oh, they're a teacher. For a teacher, suddenly we say, okay, they're a teacher, we can be alone with them. Or for example, it can be a religious scholar. Yes, even a religious scholar. Do not leave your daughters alone with a religious scholar, even if he's the most pious person in the world. I've given you the example. Okay, positions of trust. A doctor, even a lawyer, right? These positions of trust, and I don't want to elaborate too much, but I'll give you a hadith to show you perfectly what I'm talking about. The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, when two people of the opposite gender who are na mahram to each other are alone in a room, they're not alone if the door closes. Because the moment the door closes, the third person in that room will be shaitan. Okay? And this is what happens. And I've heard, unfortunately, I've heard accounts from people in the community of things going very, very bad. And there are massive scandals which have happened. يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ أَن يُخَفِّفَ عَنْكُمْ. Allah wishes to lighten your burdens. وَخُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ ضَعِيفًا. Do not, dear brothers and sisters, respected elders, do not make excuses for these things. Don't say, oh, it's okay, they're studying together. It's okay because they're studying. Do not say it's okay because they're cousins or because they're old or they're too young or whatever. It does not matter. Allah knows what He's talking about when He gives us this religion. Many of the problems which exist in society lead back to this issue of mahram and non-mahram. Okay? Now, I want to illustrate here that, yes, indeed, Islam has advocated for segregation. You go to take the example of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and other Islamic countries. You'll notice that schools are segregated. You don't even need to go to this example. Go to the salah. Even in salah, Allah has stipulated that the men stand in the front, the women stand behind. Look, even in salah, which is a jihad in and of itself, Allah is showing that men and women have different roles and they should be segregated. And that too, the women should be where the men cannot see them. Okay. Now, again, after hearing all this and hearing that Islam does not advocate for families to sit together and non-mahrams to be laughing and joking, having tea together, etc., and things of this nature, because we have become so accustomed to doing such things, we may convince ourselves that, no, I'm not listening to this sheikh. He's just taking things to an extreme. That is completely impractical, what he is saying. And I can understand that, but I would sincerely, and I'd like to beg and ask, dear brothers and sisters, respected elders, oh, dear believers, are we saying this truly and well and truly because we truly think that this is impractical and not what Islam advocates? Or are we saying it because a part of our hearts are attached to the way we have been doing things, and we just don't want to let go because we don't know how to engage now with our own gender alone? It seems too alien to us. It seems too strange to us. Okay, so I'd like us to really ask this question. Segregation is a part of Islam. Now, there is another extreme, and this extreme dictates that, women should be like, they keep, so to speak, keep them in cupboards, just lock the door and then bye-bye, no society for you. This extreme also exists, where, and this extreme, sometimes it can get incredibly awkward. Let's be honest. It can become very strange because you don't know, like, Assalamu alaikum, sister, we're doing an event and you're just like, what do I do right now? It's like, where do I look? What do I say? Can I say salam to you? Should I not say salam? It gets really confusing. On that note, though, there is a hadith of Imam Ali alayhi salam where he says that if I see a young woman in the street, I never say salam alaikum to her. If she says salam alaikum, I say wa alaikum salam. But even the Imam, that to Imam Ali alayhi salam, is telling us that he never initiated the salam. These are examples of the prophets and awliya Allah, those who had that spiritual station, and yet they would distance themselves from these things. It's a point. Now, should women never make a public appearance? Is that what we're saying here? Should men and women be so separate that they literally, as the hadith of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, as we mentioned earlier, literally they never see one another? Is that what we're advocating? No. This is another extreme, which, as far as we can tell, this is not what Islam, what the prophets and Ahlul Bayt have taught us to do. Okay, the Quran, in fact, look at when it's talking about wearing the hijab, and it tells the prophet to command the believing women to cover themselves. It says that there is a purpose for this. What is that purpose? And yu'rafna, that they may be recognized. Tell the believing women to cover themselves. One of the reasons is so that they may be recognized. Yes, there is a hikmah, a wisdom behind why Imam Khomeini said that women are the flag bearers of Islam. When you wear that hijab, you are immediately giving off a signal in society. You're telling the men out there, you're going, see this? Not for you. Okay, that's what you're doing. And this signal is very important. It is for you to be recognized and to be dignified. You are a Muslim woman. Any eyes or any hearts out there which may have a disease in them will not be inclined. And this is very important for us to recognize, that hijab is that thing which actually enables us to be active members of society. Hijab is that thing which allows our sisters to be active in the society, in the Islamic events, in the war against the shaitan in whatever form it may take, whether it's the academic field, whether it's the economic field, whatever field it may be. Hijab is that thing which will help us to get to that place. And we have examples of this. Look at Shaheed Soleimani's daughter. May Allah bless her. She's in front of the stage. She's speaking on the podium. Such brave words. She reminds you of Sayyida Zainab when she speaks. The same thing with Sheikh Zakzaki's daughter, with the sister of Shaheed Baqir as-Sadr, right? Look at these brave women and how active they were in society. They truly took it upon their shoulders to walk in the footsteps of Sayyida Zainab salamullah alayha and Sayyida Fatima al-Zahra. Okay, so this is what Islam advocates for. Yes, there's segregation, but also we need our women. They are the flag bearers of Islam. They need to be out there and they need to be recognized. But we're going to go now to Surah Nur, verse 31. Remember, we discussed this and we said that there are a certain list of things that that the Quran itself tells us to do before Allah tells us to. Before Allah highlights all those who are non-mahram for us, He tells us certain things. And there are 7 points that I want to share with you from this beautiful verse of the Quran. If we just looked at this one verse of the Quran and just contemplated on it, not even gone to the tafsir, no, just contemplated over the words of this book, the translation even. Look at where it can take us if we actually contemplate over it. What does this verse say? It says, tell the believing women to lower their gazes. It tells the verse before tells the believing men to lower their gazes. This verse is telling, number one, tell them to lower their gazes. The number one thing that the Quran tells us when it comes to mahram and non-mahram is to lower your gazes. Now, we've heard this all too often, but what does it actually mean? I feel there's a need for us to elaborate here because some people do get confused, and it's understandably so. It's only after this many years in the Hawza that I've finally started to scratch the surface of what we're talking about here. So it means, you see, look at the wordings again. It says, يَغُضُّ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ. Literally, it says, lower from, among, like a part of their vision. So lower a part, min absarihim, a bit of their vision, okay? So does this mean what? You just don't look at the non-mahram? You just, whenever she's at, you just don't look. This is her face, you just, or his face, you just, well, that, maybe that's what it means. You can do that, and I know some personalities who do that. Sometimes though, especially in the West, it can get a little bit awkward. Is that what the Quran is telling us to do? The understanding that I've gained so far after asking my teachers is this. It means not to prolong your vision. Sometimes you will be in a situation where you're talking to the opposite gender. You're engaging with the opposite gender. I don't know, it could be in the shops, it could be when you're buying something, it could be in any situation, a teacher, whatever. Your employer, whatever. You're looking at, when you're talking, don't just keep making eye contact. That gets weird. You're just making eye contact and eye contact and eye contact, and you're talking and you're talking and you're talking. There are signals going back and forth. They might be in the very depths of your subconscious, so you don't even realize it, but it's happening. And if it's not happening, if you're really that pure, it's not happening with them. You have no control over what's happening in their mind. You don't know. Okay. One thing I need to tell the sisters is, like, when you say hello, a lot of this discussion happens on the online world in cyberspace. You know, when you send a smiley face to a brother, you might just be thinking, yeah, it's just a smiley face, but he's thinking it's a smiley face. Okay. Men think in a very different way. Right. One of the things that Quran tells us is to lower our gaze. That's the first thing. Okay. Second thing, to guard their chastity. Now, this is not always about the physical act itself, which we think of, that the haram act itself. No, that's what it ultimately may be. But no, actually, there is a zina. The Ahlul Bayt have taught us, zina of the eyes is to look at that which does not belong to us. Zina of the hand is to touch that which does not belong to us. Sometimes with the excuse of being professional in the workplace, we will offer our hands to the non-mahrams to shake their hands. This is haram. And I want to tell you something today which really helped me, because it was difficult for me as well. It can get so awkward and you don't know what to do. You're all mu'mineen, inshallah. The main issue is we're afraid of offending somebody. Let's face it, that's the real problem. And part of it is we're actually scared of what people will think of us. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, never apologize for following your religion. It's as simple as that. Just put your hand on your chest and say, sorry, I don't shake hands with the opposite gender. Sorry, I don't shake hands with women. Sorry, I don't shake hands with men. Okay, if you're a sister. It really is that simple. When you try it, you'll see that it's actually not that hard. The third point that this verse tells us is not to expose. Allah is telling the believing women not to expose their adornment except that which is apparent. What is that which is apparent? The marjas have highlighted it for us. It is the face and the hands. Okay? The face and the hands. That's what it is. Not the feet. All right, we have to hide the feet as well. Dear sisters, we need to be wearing socks in front of the opposite gender. This is a part of our hijab, right? And all the other parts up to the wrists. You can't be wearing short sleeves or sleeves which come up to just here. You're exposing a part of your wrist. Who's read The Spire by William Golding? Put your hand up if you've read it. Chances are nobody's got their hand up. If you have, please do put your hands down. That you just look silly. But anyway, in this book, there's a part in this book where the main character is going mad and he falls in love with this woman, and it's based in like over 100 years ago. And he says, "Oh, she exposed a part of her ankle." And when the teacher was reading this to us in class, we all giggled, and all the girls were giggling. They're like, "What is it talking about?" And the teacher had to explain that, look, men are very strange. Even that can awaken the beast, okay, so to speak. So this is William Golding's The Spire, even a Western novel, right? And these things are things which many of our innocent young sisters are not aware of, and many of our older sisters are also not aware of. We need to become aware of it. Not to expose their adornment. Now, the fourth thing is to wrap their head covers over their chests. The Quran says not only to cover the hair, but to wrap the head covering over the other part of the body. Herein lies a fundamental and pivotal point that we need to address. clothing and hijab for women is not only about covering the hair, it is about covering the shape of the woman's body as well. Very, very important point. And it reminds me of a hadith from the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says that towards the end times, women will be naked despite being clothed. So even though they're wearing clothes, they're still going to be naked. Somebody asked, what does this mean? The Ahlul Bayt explained for us, it means that they will be wearing transparent clothing or tight clothing. Dear brothers and sisters, it is not enough for sisters to be wearing clothes which simply cover. No, they need to be loose-fitting clothes. Very important point. Otherwise, we are going to be naked while wearing clothes. Imam Khomeini, in order to highlight just how prevalent and how dangerous the vision of men is, and to make women understand, he said, if women knew how men perceive them, they would cover themselves with iron armor. You know, like what the knights wore, you know, the knights of shining armor back in the medieval times, they would cover themselves with full body armor. Imam Khomeini is saying, if women knew the way that men perceive them, they would wear that body armor. Okay, that's not me saying, that's Imam Khomeini. Now, that's the fourth point. The fifth point, not expose their zinat. The zina, the Quran is telling us, the Quran itself, by the way, not the ahadith, the Quran. Even the ahadith, sometimes there's reason or motives to doubt the ahadith. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the Quran. What is zina? Zina is the beautification of a woman. Allah is saying not to wear this in front of non-mahrams. The beautification. What is the beautification? Well, we have this, don't we? You look around. Women are wearing makeup, for instance, you know. You're painting your face. You're putting red on your lips to make it more red. And you're putting on makeup to make your eyes more attractive. A lot of sisters will use the excuse that, well, you know, I'm not doing it for the opposite gender. I'm doing it for myself. Sister, come on. Do you see yourself more often than other people? Who sees you more often? Unless you're walking around with a mirror in front of you like this, you know, everywhere you go. No, other people are far more likely to see you. And another point which somebody has just raised, and I'm glad that they just raised it, is the point of perfume. A woman is not supposed to wear perfume in public. And there are hadiths to the effect that that woman who wears perfume in public so that a non-mahram will smell her and, you know, be attracted to her, this woman is cursed. Okay, very important. Now, the sixth point in this verse is Allah highlights for us all those people who are mahram, so that it becomes unavoidable for us, which we've discussed. And the seventh point is this. Might sound like a little bit of a strange point. Allah says, do not let the women stamp their feet. Okay, so in the Arab times, before Islam came, women used to wear something on their feet to make it go clack, 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 clack on the ground, okay? And they used to wear it in order to attract men. You know, it was something attractive, you know. You hear this noise, you go, where's that coming from? You look and there's a woman, clack, clack, clack. Islam came to tell women, don't do this. This is bad for you, all right? Don't do this. This is an act of the age of Jahiliyyah. Where have we seen this before? Go to China. Ancient China, they used to have these women called geishas, and other women generally, they used to do terrible things to their feet because the men saw small feet as attractive, and so the women would be forced to wear these tiny little shoes and from a young age. And when they grew up, they would not remove these shoes until their feet became like this. And if you look online, Chinese old feet, I don't know how to look for it, but look at it, looks disgusting. But women would do this to themselves because they thought it made them look beautiful. Do we have a modern equivalent of this? Oh yeah, we have heels, right? Why do we wear heels? Now, I want to point out here, heels may not be haram per se, i.e. the marjas won't tell you that it's haram, but is part of Islamic culture? That's something that we have to ask ourselves. If you look at the studies which have been done on high heels, they do terrible things to the woman's body. They hurt, and they help in the development of back pain, and they actually change the posture of a woman to the point where it can actually lead to spinal injury and injuries in the ankles and things like that. 100 years from now, people may be looking back and thinking, ew, look what they used to do. Just like we are now looking back at the Chinese and thinking, ew, what did they used to do? And they're probably looking back at the Arabs of the age of Jahiliyyah and thinking, ew, what did they used to do? Let's change now. And just quickly, I'd like to ask before we go to the Masa'ib, dear brothers and sisters, respected elders, is this part of our culture? What is the culture that we're surrounded by? Is it a culture where we have taught ourselves to lower our gazes, for instance, when we're walking down the streets? Or no, we're looking this way, that way, and every way. Are we prolonging our gazes when we're looking at the opposite gender? And is this actually part of our culture now? In the workplace, are we refraining from these basic things, from shaking hands with the non-mahrams, etc.? When it comes to not exposing our zinat, wearing makeup, heels, and other things like that, have we learnt to justify these things? Saying, oh, well, it's a wedding, for instance. Saying that it's urf, everybody's doing it, therefore I can do it too. Have we justified it to ourselves? Have we justified a culture which is, in fact, against the culture of Islam and what the Ahlul Bayt and the Quran have taught us? And now, I'd like to take you now to some very, very painful incidents from Karbala. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. It is said that somebody came to our Imam Sajjad. They said, oh Imam, how can you still be weeping after so many years? All these years have passed by and you are still crying for Hussein. Why is it that this pain and this grief does not subside? Imam turns to this person and he says, don't you know that Yaqub in the Quran, only when he was separated from Yusuf, he cried until his eyes became blind, until his eyes became white, and he was only separated from his Yusuf. I witnessed my father being slain on the battlefield of Karbala. I witnessed my uncle Abbas as he was galloping back from the river Euphrates to bring water for the orphans. I saw how they shot him with arrows and they cut off his arms. And I saw how an arrow pierced his water carrier. My entire family was massacred before my eyes. This is why I will never stop crying. Do you not know? Do you not know that Muhammad al-Mustafa had foreseen that an ummah would come who would have such grief for Hussein and the martyrdom of Hussein that they would mourn for him and have a grief in their hearts which would not subside until the day of judgment. Even after witnessing all of these tragedies, when Imam Sajjad was asked, what moments were most difficult for you to bear? Imam Sajjad did not say it was that moment that Abbas fell from his horse. Imam Sajjad did not say it was that moment that Hussein cried out, Hazmin Nasirin Yansurni, and I was not able to go and help him because I was too sick. He did not say it was those moments of absolute pain and torture and grief. Imam Sajjad cried out, Asham, Asham, Asham. He cried out. It was Syria. It was when I had to witness Sayyida Zainab, Kulthum, Sakina, and the women of the household of the Prophet being paraded in the streets of Kufa and Sham without their heads covered. It is said that somebody went to Imam Sajjad and said, oh Imam, I want to give my condolences for what they have done to you and for what they did to the Ahlul Bayt before even Imam Hussein. I want to give you condolences, for certainly they slapped the face of your grandmother Fatima al-Zahra. Imam Sajjad said they are still slapping the face of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. The man asked how. He said, whenever they go out without their hijabs, whenever they are not observing their hijabs, these women are slapping the face of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. And I want to take you back now to the plains of Karbala, when the women's tent was about to be attacked, when Abbas had been slain and when Hussein had been slain, and they had set the tents on fire. The women, it is said, they covered the hair with the soil of Karbala, and they were covering their faces so that they would not be seen by the enemies as they came to loot their tents. They were hiding their faces with their hair. One of the daughters of Hussein who was being looted by the enemies, while he is looting her and taking away her property, he is weeping, and she says, why are you weeping? And he says, how can I not be weeping when we are looting the tents of the family of Rasulullah? And she says, why are you looting us then? And he says, because I am afraid that if I do not loot you, that somebody else will. This is what the family of the Prophet went through. This is what they had endured for the sake of their chadors. And when their chadors were snatched and they were whipped and they were mounted onto camels without saddles in Kufa, all of the eyes of the Non-Mahrams were on the daughters of Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And at this point, it is said that Kulthum could not bear this anymore, and she cried out, oh Kufans, where is your sense of shame before Allah and Rasulullah, that you look upon the ladies of the household of Mustafa? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. I'd like to end with a dua. If everybody, wherever we are, if we could raise our hands, inshallah, and do a very short dua. I'd like to ask the organizers, inshallah. I know somebody's put their hand up. If there are any questions, I'm willing to take them at the end, inshallah, with the permission of the organizers and the host. But I'd like to end with this dua. Oh Allah, please help us to determine and to distinguish between right and wrong in this era of absolute confusion. Oh Allah, help us to put aside our nafs and to fight against our own petty selves and to bring forth an Islamic culture into our environments, into our homes, into the society, into the communities. Oh Allah, help us to adhere not only by that perimeter which has been set forth, the harams and halals, but help us to go a step further and implement the culture of Islam into our environments. Oh Allah, help us بحق Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad to completely and utterly become the soldiers of Imam Mahdi, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajuh sharif, and to safeguard ourselves and our daughters and our young brothers and our youths in general. Help us to safeguard ourselves from the insinuations of shaitan. ببركة salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.
Jazakallah Shaykh for that great lecture. Thank you for reminding us the importance of segregation, especially while living in the West. I think it was a very important reminder from myself and my brothers and sisters. Sister Asma, if you have a question, would you like to send it in the chat box? We'll just give her a minute. Oh, it was an error. No problem. I would like to thank everyone for attending. Inshallah, may Allah help us live like Muhammad and wa Ali Muhammad, and inshallah, may we die with the same principles as Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Inshallah, tomorrow will be night 2 of the series. And from me and all the organizers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.